You have quite a custody story, and I think the most interesting part for me that you told me was you'd gotten divorced, and then I want to ask you about that. But and it was settled. The custody issue was settled. You were the primary caretaker, and I think 6 years after the settlement was when everything blew up. Is that right?
Yeah, sadly, that's correct. So I
Now,
was married for.
for those who haven't gone through it, how if it's settled and you have an order and everybody's following the order, how can the situation blow up 6 years after the fact?
Well, the the court system is ripe for these types of things to happen when they want to promote a certain agenda to have one parent be the obligor and one parent be the so to speak the protective parent or the which automatically labels you so to speak the abusive parent. But my ex-wife, we had a wonderful 23-year long marriage, 25 years together, 8 children together, and she went off the path, so to speak, had a self-admitted midlife crisis and crisis of faith, and so we adjusted, we all adjusted, we got a divorce. It was over 10 years ago already now, and yes, we stipulated that I would be the primary parent. I took care of the kids all by myself, six children for 6 years, and about 4 years into it or so, she filed for a modification of one child. She's like, I want such and such daughter to come live with me. And that then, um, you know, turned into now it's almost 6 years. It'll be 6 years in August, but it's turned into this 6 year long nightmare where, the first year and a half, 2 years, I was fighting this modification. We were only talking about one child, and and at the time we were co-parenting. I was, she was getting, seeing the kids on the weekends, on some weekends and some holidays, and I was always very try to be very amicable. But her and her fiance, the gentleman who she left the marriage with, who she's now married to, just always caused all kinds of problems and issues. And they started with this modification of one child, and a year and a half later, almost $200,000 into it, having to defend myself and having to defend against this modification, they denied the modification and said there's no endangerment to the children.
Mhm.
3 weeks later, less than 3 weeks later, they file a new modification for a restriction against me. And then that continued and snowballed into another restriction, more false allegations, more, and it just. But the first part of this, you have to plead what your relief is going to be. So they never pled that she was trying to change custody for all 5 children at the time,
Mhm.
and they forced us
What
into a
did she
two
plead to? What did she plead to?
just
Anything?
for one child, just a
Okay.
modification for one child.
Mhm.
But they forced us into a 2 day hearing. Anyway, but in the end, they denied the modification, and then that continued, with more abusive court process, false allegations.
All right, now
Um,
let me interrupt you. You say they're false, but I know that I'm going to have some cynical viewers who are going to say, "Of course, you're saying they're false." So explain the allegations and explain why they're false.
um, during the modification for one child, like I always insulated the children. Never spoke to them about the court cases, never spoke badly about their mother. I tried to keep the children out of it. And unfortunately, we had a child and family investigator who did all kinds of misconduct in the case. Had missed like 3 deadlines, and in the end filed this extremely fraudulent report that should have been stricken from the record. But this particular, speaking of anti-Semitism, this particular child and family investigator, who was actually sanctioned later based on my complaint, um, she was found to have violated 3 or 4 professional standards. She was put on probation for a year. She was suspended for a month. She was made to take classes. But part of the issue with the child and family investigator she was trying to claim that somehow the religious part of it, somehow that she questioned my faith, and directly questioned my faith, and allowed my ex-wife to falsely testify that I'm
No,
somehow.
I somebody from the outside would say the First Amendment, which people think is freedom of speech and press, which it is also freedom of religion. You have the right to be a Jew and you're an Orthodox Jew. How can that kind of bigotry be allowed in any court? Wouldn't that bigotry violate the Constitution? Isn't that
Yeah.
something for your attorneys pointed out immediately?
It was kind of not really brought up in the forefront until after I had to let my attorney go. I mean, I spent in total over $300,000 in legal fees between the original 2-3 years of litigation and appeals initially. But this has been kind of an ongoing situation. I mean, if you ask anyone, I could give you references. I was never abusive, never verbally, emotionally abusive. In fact, my ex-wife was arrested.
Let's just clear this up. You got divorced. When the divorce was ongoing, did she accuse you of abuse?
I mean, the typical, well, he called me this bad name, and she called.
Did she say you ever hit her?
No. In fact, she was arrested.
Did she say you ever hit your children?
Never.
Absolutely
so
never. All of these abuse allegations.
Did the judge make any reference of that in the order, the original order?
No, they tried to bury that. No, as far as
let me tell you, that's very important.
In the original divorce decree, there was no mention of any allegations of abuse whatsoever.
Right. So here, let me back up and explain something for a second. So during the original, in proximity to the divorce, my ex-wife attacked me twice physically. She was arrested for assault in the 3rd degree, was never prosecuted, and that got kind of swept under the rug once we stipulated to me having full-time or near full-time care. In the post-decree action that started in 2019, that issue basically was swept under the rug, and so I was never accused of abuse. And then when my ex-wife decided she wanted to go for custody of one of the 6 children at the time, she realized, I believe at the time, that, oh, well, I have to somehow prove that he's an emotional danger. He's somehow a danger to the children. Otherwise, I won't be able to get my custody motion to be able to be approved by the court. So all of a sudden, it was like, well, I'm going to manipulate things. I'm going to get a therapist involved. I'm going to get this person involved. When the children were with me, they were getting straight A's in school. They had all kinds of activities, sports, dance class, all kinds of things were happening under my care. And I was a full-time provider, full-time father and caregiver. I cooked and baked and cleaned and did everything without any issues and without any question of any abuse. Only once she decided to try to go for custody of one of the children, then she started to try to make some false allegations of somehow emotional abuse or things of that nature. And by then, we were already a couple years now into this post decree actions. And once the first action, see, here's what's really crazy. So the judge, even though the whole thing was fixed and the whole thing was there were so many problems with the actual final ruling, they took away some of my decision making, but they said no, there is no endangerment here, and that was at the lower bar of endangerment. 2 weeks later, 2.5 weeks later, they file a new restriction at the higher bar, and they basically restricted my time with one of the kids, and then that spiraled into a whole series of additional actions and additional things that happened. So did that kind of cover what you were looking for, or what are you asking exactly?
Now, how did you get arrested? I think you've spent time in jail. How did that happen?
So so after all of these things happened, all of these fraudulent restrictions, and I had been appealing, so I did everything right. I have all kinds of advocates that know me, that came to the hearings, that knew my case, from the National Parents Organization, from Fathers' Rights Movement, from several women, in fact, even. And I had a coach. I had a coach. This wonderful woman. She came to like 6 or 7 of my hearings, the last hearings. But basically, after all of these things happened, they said I did everything right. Jacob did everything right. He filed appeals. He filed petitions at the Supreme Court. He filed complaints. He did everything that he was supposed to do, but yet the system still failed me. And so as I was pushing forward, at some point, I started exposing the corruption. I filed some criminal complaints against some of the actors. I filed a number of documents, and at that point, the attorney was getting nervous, I think, my ex-wife's attorney, and they filed a fraudulent protection order against me. The attorney did, and claimed that he was somehow scared because I sent him a communication to his home address. Got a fraudulent protection order against me, and then they actually disappeared the evidence when I tried to get the exhibits. They just said they destroyed them, and then anyway, several months later. So my ex-wife was now realizing that she was also facing potential criminal, crimes that I was alleging, and so then she filed a fraudulent protection order, and she did so on the Jewish holidays, and so I wasn't able to attend the hearing or respond at that point. Anyway, I sent a text message. At this point, I still had communication with my younger children. My minor children, I was still able to at least speak to them on the phone, but I was always being obstructed. She wouldn't allow me to talk to them. The phone I had gotten from my daughter was every other week or every couple months, it would just disappear. It was gone, and she couldn't find it, or I couldn't get a hold. So it was around the Jewish holiday time, around Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and I sent a text message to my ex-wife, not recognizing whatever.
That violated the protective order, though.
Well, but the problem is the protective order was garnered without my involvement. I didn't have a chance to defend myself. The protective order also had 7 material frauds in the protective order, and I've been fighting that and bringing it to the court's attention on numerous fronts. I had a habeas corpus appeal I filed that's still pending at the Colorado Supreme Court. I filed. I filed a district court appeal. I'm in the middle of filing a SCOTUS petition right now for denial of my writ of certiorari at the Supreme Court, at the Colorado Supreme Court. But the bottom line is, all I was asking for was to talk to my daughter. It was 4 words: have my daughter's name. Have daughter call me. Have daughter call me. From that.
Did the protective order have a carve out? Because oftentimes when you have kids, they'll have a carve out that you're allowed to communicate about the kids. Did it have that carve out?
No carve out like that.
So you did violate the protective order. It doesn't seem like a significant violation. Did those 4 words land you in jail?
Yes. They prosecuted me for 15, 16 months. We had hearing after hearing.
How much time did they want you to spend in jail for saying have my daughter?
They were pushing for 6 months in jail.
6 months?
Yeah.
A month and a half per word.
They were pushing for 6 months in jail. Anyway, so they when we went to a jury trial, which I had filed all kinds of documents, and it should have never gone to a jury trial. The way with all the things that I brought to their attention, I mean, there was fraud upon fraud, lie upon lie, and it's all proven based on the record, based on documents alone. You can see that my ex-wife lied in the protective order. But anyway, so I went to this jury trial. I didn't have an attorney because I wasn't prepared to even. I didn't think they were going to even go ahead with it. But I was forced into all this stuff. I ended up representing, trying to defend myself or trying to prove my innocence. I guess there's really nothing to defend against. But in the end, they convicted me of an act of domestic violence for a forward text message just asking to talk to my daughter. They gave me two years of supervised probation, psychological and domestic violence evaluation, domestic violence classes, drug testing, biweekly meetings with probation officer. I mean, my life has been turned upside down. I haven't been able to, I can't do anything. I can't leave the state of Colorado. I can't go, move on with my life. I've been engrossed in all of this litigation for the last 5.5 years. They basically made me homeless, made me penniless. My professional career of decades long career was basically terminated because of all this nonsense that I was dealing with. Dozens and dozens of hearings, all this legal nonsense that this lawfare basically. And now, my ex-wife was permitted to move with her husband to Florida, and that's under appeal. So I've tried everything. I've tried all kinds of mechanisms to get relief, and there's just no relief. There's no redress in the family court system. There's nothing available to actually get the truth out there and to actually get a resolution to anything.
Rabbi, you made some allegations about coordination, even between the state and federal systems, about how the judges are protecting each other. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Sure. I can actually give you a perfect example of something that happened recently. There was so I have two 10th Circuit Court appeals pending right now for lawsuits that were dismissed based on the Younger abstention of Rooker-Feldman doctrines, and it was improperly, in my opinion, dismissed because of a number of factors and the way the lawsuits were outlined. There's all kinds of
and the Rooker-Feldman, what are they? They're about federal abstention. So give a short brief for our people listening who might not know what those mean.
Basically, the federal courts kick out most pro se or most self-represented litigant cases based on this idea that if there's some sort of a state case that's ongoing, then they have to abstain, or if there's a state case that's concluded, they have to abstain. There's all these rules and to try to suggest that they don't have jurisdiction to hear constitutional questions or constitutional violations of your rights, and they claim that the state courts are the proper forum for that. But unfortunately, when you're in the state courts and you go to every level of the state court and the executive branch and the judicial branch and the legislative branch, and no one does anything, there needs to be a mechanism for the federal courts to take jurisdiction and to actually hear your constitutional claims. As far as their coordination is concerned, the state attorney general's office is basically representing all the actors that I'm suing in their personal capacities. So the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Brian Dale Boatwright, two chief judges from different districts, the 1st Judicial District and 18th Judicial District, two clerks of court, a couple of magistrates, 3 prosecutors, my ex-wife, her fiance, the attorney involved. But anyway, as far as this coordination is concerned, I'll give you an example. Recently, there was a cross filing that was made by the Attorney General's office, who should know better not to be manipulating the court record. Had nothing to do with this other case. Cross-filed it into this case, wouldn't correct the issue. So I filed a complaint with the Office of Attorney Regulation Counsel, and I also simultaneously filed a sanctions motion with the 10th Circuit Court. On the same day, within less than about a week or so, the one dismissed it and said, "Oh, it's just suspicion. There's nothing here," and the other one said, "Well, we're just going to push it out and wait and let the panel of judges decide." Months and months later, it's like, well, why are you coordinating? All of a sudden on the same day you have a coordinated action between the state Office of Attorney Regulation Counsel and the 10th Circuit Court clerks, who are basically saying, we're going to just sweep this under the rug. Attorney misconduct doesn't matter here. But yet when it comes to my filings, they hold me to this high, strict standard, and and they allow the anything that the attorneys want. The Office of Attorney General, they've got an entire Department of Law. They have 10 attorneys working for them, or maybe even more.
There is a judicial bias against you, but
And Rabbi, they won't even refer to you as Rabbi in court, right? They won't even refer you.
Yeah, that's correct. I've throughout all these different cases, it doesn't necessarily. It's not just that. So one of the things I filed on certiorari for was the fact that they're allowing these hearings to occur on Jewish holidays, on Jewish religious holidays, and they're not providing any accommodation for me whatsoever. And even though I've given them notice and told them, and they'll just go ahead. For example, the protection order hearing, it was conducted on a Jewish holiday. The CFI questioning my level of observance and trying to make all kinds of anti-Semitic remarks. The magistrate, one of the magistrates, saying that I think you believe you own your ex-wife, which couldn't be farther from the truth. We've been divorced for years, and it's not even you don't own someone. Purposely refusing to call me by my title. In all kinds of contexts, even just in basic, communications, trying to be professional. The clerk's office, who have been dealing with me for years. One of the clerk's office, the clerk apparently dislikes me terribly, but I've brought it to her attention dozens of times. Please refer to me in my title. This is culturally appropriate, and it's culturally insensitive not to. Mr. Bellinsky, blah blah blah. And they just continue on, and they purposely put it out there in my face to try to act like they don't have to give me that respect. It's no different than a doctor or a pastor. If a doctor came in and he's a doctor, you would call him doctor, right? Or I spent 10 years.
Yeah, Rabbi, you're on the street and the judge walks along, you call him Mister. You know that.
Go ahead, Rabbi. You wanted to add something?
There was other things too. I mean, they refused to rule on my habeas corpus petition. They swept it under the rug. My oldest daughter's wedding was happening, a Jewish wedding, and I had to miss her Jewish wedding because they would refuse to grant any kind of emergency relief or to follow the Constitution and grant my habeas corpus petition. There was no reason to bar me from my own daughter's wedding or my son. I have 4 boys and 4 girls. My sons, before the last one, I trained them. We to do their bar mitzvah, brought them up to the Torah. Went through all the traditions and the religious observances with respect to that. And my 4th son just didn't have a bar mitzvah. They completely excluded me from my children's lives. I haven't been able, one thing after another, and they'll claim, well, you could see them, or you could talk to them under supervised visitation, or you could have, if you would have just done X, Y, and Z, they'll make these claims and allegations that somehow it's my fault. But if you understand the court record, if you understand all the series of steps and manipulation and the things that these judges and magistrates and attorneys and everyone does behind the scenes, they prevented me from seeing my children for months upon months upon months, which dragged down into years now. I have not been able to see or speak to my minor children in 4 years. And, you have convicted felons who are getting visitation with their children. And here I am. I can't even have a single phone call or a Skype call or a visitation with my children. Yet they should have never. I actually the appeal that I did originally.
Did we lose him?
He might have lost his
All right, he's going to get back. I wanted to get this up on the screen. This is the article that I did, which was the most. Rabbi, before you finish that, I wanted to get to this article because a lot of the things you said are similar to this case. This is about Julie Goffstein, And her divorce started because she and her then husband, Peter, raised their kids Orthodox Jewish. And all of a sudden, he didn't want to be Jewish at all. And the rest of the family said, well, we're staying Jewish. And part of the reasoning that the judge gave to give Peter custody was that he basically felt that the Jewish schooling was so radical that the kids should be brought up in a regular public school. The other thing that Julie was ordered to do, and you'll understand this, was to bring the kids back at a time where she would have to drive during the Shabbat. So he was purposely making rulings that violated her religious liberty, and it was allowed. This is a case out of Ohio. It was allowed, and it was the same thing. And look, what happened was her son was at the school where the kid shot it up, and she hadn't heard from him in a year and a half. And he sends her a text message and says, hey, there's a gunman in my school. And that's the first time she had heard from her son in a year and a half. But that's another case of a blatant violation of religious liberty. Hopefully we'll get the rabbi back, and then we'll wrap this up. So hold on. Let's get him.
I'm sorry, we cut out for a second there.
All right. So you want to continue, and then let's wrap this up.
Basically, the one point I wanted to make that I got cut off on originally was the fact that the original appeals that I did, they actually came back and said, yes, we need to reverse these restrictions. These restrictions are not they cannot stand. But by that point already, they had done a de facto custody change, and they said, well, you can go back to court and look at the current circumstances of where everything is. And not only that, but then they financially sanctioned me. So even though I was not supposed to have been separated from my children, and they found that had to be reversed, they still back hit me up with child support, didn't allow my appeal on the termination of maintenance, even though my ex-wife has been living with this man for 10 years, and he was who she cheated with at the beginning of the divorce. But yet I'm paying alimony for years. I'm paying alimony, taking care of the kids by myself, all these things. But the point is that the courts even had to come back and say, no, we should have never separated you from your children. But they do this in a way that becomes a de facto change of custody, and there's no resolution. In the end, they just completely cut you off from your children, and it's very, very sad. And I'm sorry to hear about that Gottstein case. I'll look into it. Gottstein. But that's a very similar circumstances here. My ex-wife went off the path and decided she didn't want to be religious anymore, and caused all kinds of upheaval with the children and with the family, and I tried to manage through that. Yeah.
Right, and they violated her rights because they're and she's Orthodox Jewish. They're asking her to drive on the Shabbat. That's the only way she can get the kids to her ex-husband in time. And then when she didn't do it, they would say you violating a court order. Stuff like that was happening. That's how they kept the kids away from her. But did I hear you right? So the court acknowledged that their original order separating you from the kids was wrong.
Right.
But they're not going to fix it in any way.
Correct. Yep. Exactly. Yep.
Amazing. Family court, ladies and gentlemen. Rabbi, anything else you wanted to
add? So I've tried a few different things. I'm hoping that if any of your listeners might be willing to maybe sign a petition that I started. I'm looking at the various other types of creative methodologies to try to get redress. I feel like every path has been blocked from the federal courts, the state courts, all these different methods to try to get redress. Anyway, I started a petition to get a legislative grand jury in Colorado to discuss, we have all kinds of corruption in Colorado, and maybe it could be a model. But, unfortunately, our government has taken away the grand jury system. And when there are crimes, I mean, this is criminal. What they've done to my family, I spent 30 years raising 8 children, sacrificing everything in my life for my children, my family, my ex-wife, and just out of nowhere, they can come and destroy your life, take away your children, separate you, and you have no redress, no recourse to do anything. So part of what I'm trying to do is create some various mechanisms or other types of things. And I'm trying to get a grand jury petition, a grand jury started at the legislative, you know, at the legislature in
Mhm.
Colorado. But if you
Is
guys
that
could share
allowed
my
in
link.
Colorado? Is that allowed?
Well, yeah, they have the statutory authority, and there's all kinds of precedent based on it. I mean, if there's corruption in the judicial and executive branches, and nobody will do their jobs, and nobody will follow up, and nobody will give me any kinds of criminal complaint numbers or do any investigations, and they just deny and dismiss everything. Well, and it's not just my case. I know dozens of other people in Colorado who have faced the same kinds of things, and I also, for those that have been following the last few years in Colorado, there was all kinds of corruption with respect to quid pro quo, silencing people to try to, keep some of this misconduct from the public spotlight. I mean, there was a 5 years of reporting on this sex discrimination lawsuit case in Colorado. I mean, there was tremendous amount of corruption that needs to be investigated, and if the executive branch and judicial branch are corrupt, so I'm trying to speak to my legislators, my congressional assembly members in Colorado to sign on to legislation. I actually drafted some legislation. I started a petition. I provided them an entire 12-page memo with all the legal basis for why and how they can do this. And so I'm just hoping that we can get some additional people interested and maybe sign up.
All right, I got one last. Let me get one question. The media, how you've reached out to plenty of media, haven't you? How's their response?
So I never wanted to be public. I never wanted to have to come on podcasts. I never wanted to share pictures and share my family or have my Facebook open. In fact, I just shut it down recently. But the problem is, for 3 years, the only outlet for vindication of your rights is to try to get some media coverage, because it's the court of public opinion that really matters. These courts are all kangaroo courts. They don't follow the law. They don't follow the Constitution. They die in darkness. I mean, there's nothing there. They don't allow you access to, you have to if it's a rare occasion to actually get an open hearing, things like that. But it's it's just it
But
comes to a point.
Have you tried to get other media, and how has that response been?
Well, so for 3 years, I've tried copying media from all the major legacy media outlets, all the newspapers in Denver and Colorado Springs, and all, even national ones, and not a single article or contact. I mean, I had a contact once with this one famous reporter, but instead of actually covering my case, he did a hit piece on someone involved in my case, and kind of misled me regarding, So unfortunately, the legacy media, most journalists don't want to cover these types of cases. And to your credit, Mr. Volpe, to your credit, Mr. Luthman, you guys are actually doing the actual heavy lifting and covering these very important issues that most people don't want to talk about. And so I actually. I praise you both for doing such great work and covering these things. And listen, I have nothing to hide. I'm happy to be interviewed, and I'll be happy to share. Like, my case is all online. All the documents I filed, all the court documents. If anybody wants to actually look into my case and see the truth, it's all available online. So,
I agree with you, Rabbi, but I it's changing, and more media is covering this. So it's still hard, but it's a lot easier than it was even a few years ago. Rick, I think you had a question.
Have you looked at anything federally? Have you looked at, especially with the new Justice Department coming in, and also with a lot of the government efficiency angles? I know I published on Doge and how they're looking at court systems, particularly Colorado, which is a blue state court system. It's corrupt, but it's Republican and Democrat counties in Colorado are fall under the same issue. Have you looked at any of the federal stuff, both through DOJ and corrupt actors and public corruption, or from the funding standpoint? You made any of those type of outreaches?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have, Mr. Luffman. So I actually recently sent a letter. It was like a 10 or 12-page letter to President Trump, Secretary Kennedy, the three members of the Doge Caucus, and Mr. Musk regarding some complaints that I had filed and regarding the Title 4D and some of the mechanisms and how and why it's hurting families. On another level, I also last summer filed a whistleblower complaint with the House Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan's House Judiciary Committee, and they're reviewing and investigating that case. And in fact, I've also been in touch now with four other victims of injustice from the district court in Colorado, and they're actually going to be preparing a letter to join my whistleblower complaint to bring that to Congress, to their attention of the whistleblower committee in Congress. As far as the DOJ is concerned, I've sent numerous letters to Kristen Clark of the Civil Rights Division. I've sent all kinds of communications to the Inspector General, OIG offices, various other offices, but I'm basically waiting in a kind of a holding pattern right now to see how they're going to respond and what's going to happen. I filed official complaints online through the online portals with the OIG, with the civil rights, and so on. And I've also sent a direct communication, certified mail to some of those top officials as well.
All right, I think we're done. Rabbi Bellinsky, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a good day.